The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Mickey's Roadside Cafe, a small diner tucked away on Highway 47. Cars came and went at a steady rhythm as travelers stopped for coffee and comfort food during their long journeys. Among the usual crowd sat Lila Jackson, a 13-year-old girl whose bright spirit had been dimmed by months of battling leukemia. Lila's wheelchair was positioned near a wooden bench outside the cafe's entrance. A colorful blanket covered her frail legs, and a knitted cap hid the patches where her once thick hair had fallen out from chemotherapy. Despite everything she had endured, her dark eyes still held a spark of curiosity as she watched birds hop between the parked cars, pecking at crumbs left behind by previous visitors. Her parents had gone inside to order lunch, leaving Lila to enjoy the fresh air and sunshine. She preferred being outdoors whenever possible. The hospital rooms had become suffocating after countless treatments, and any chance to feel normal again was precious to her. She closed her eyes and listened to the gentle sounds around her, the distant hum of traffic, conversations drifting from inside the cafe, and the cheerful chirping of sparrows. The peaceful moment shattered when the roar of motorcycle engines filled the air. Lila's eyes snapped open as 5 leather-clad bikers pulled into the parking lot, their bikes gleaming chrome and black paint. They parked haphazardly across several spaces, their loud voices and harsh laughter immediately changing the atmosphere of the quiet afternoon. At first, Lila hoped they wouldn't notice her. She had learned to make herself invisible in public places, understanding that her appearance often drew unwanted attention. Some people stared with pity, others with discomfort, and a few with outright disgust. She had developed thick skin over the months, but that didn't make the stares hurt any less. Her hope was short-lived. Marcus Tank Rodriguez, the group's leader, spotted her immediately. His massive frame was covered in tattoos, and a graying beard hung down to his chest. Years of intimidating others had given him a keen eye for easy targets, and the sight of the vulnerable girl in the wheelchair brought a cruel smile to his face. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Tank called out, his voice dripping with mock surprise. "Looks like someone's having a rough day." His 4 companions, Snake, Razor, Bull, and Viper, turned to look where he was pointing. Their faces lit up with the same twisted amusement that Tank displayed. Lila's heart began to race as the 5 men approached her. She gripped the armrests of her wheelchair tightly, her knuckles turning white. Years of illness had taught her to recognize danger, and every instinct in her body was screaming that these men meant trouble. "What's wrong, little girl?" Snake sneered, his voice high and mocking. "Cat got your tongue, or you just too tired to talk?" The tattoo that gave him his nickname, a serpent coiled around his neck, seemed to move as he spoke, making him appear even more menacing. Lila tried to look away, but Razor stepped directly in front of her wheelchair, blocking her view of anything else. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he said, his tone becoming more aggressive. It's rude not to answer when someone's being friendly. The word friendly was spoken with such sarcasm that it made Lila flinch. She had encountered bullies before her diagnosis, but being sick had made her an even bigger target. The combination of her race, her disability, and her obvious illness created a perfect storm that seemed to bring out the worst in certain people. "Please," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm just waiting for my parents." "Oh, she speaks." Bull laughed, clapping his hands in exaggerated delight. "And here I thought maybe the treatments had fried her brain too." The casual cruelty in his words hit Lila like a physical blow, and she felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. Tank stepped closer, looming over her small frame. "You know what I think. I think you're taking up space that normal people could be using. This bench is for customers, not for charity cases who can't even walk." His words were designed to cut deep, and they found their mark. The other bikers circled around Lila's wheelchair like vultures, their presence growing more threatening by the second. Viper reached out as if to touch her blanket, causing Lila to shrink back in fear. "What's under here?" he asked with a leering grin. "More broken parts?" Around the parking lot, other customers began to notice the commotion. Some quickly looked away and hurried into the cafe, not wanting to get involved. Others stood at a distance, watching with expressions of discomfort, but doing nothing to help. A few pulled out their phones, but instead of calling for help, they began recording what they assumed would be an entertaining confrontation. Lila felt completely alone and helpless. The bikers were getting bolder, their comments becoming more vicious with each passing moment. She could feel their hatred washing over her like a poisonous tide, and for the first time in months, she found herself wishing she could simply disappear forever. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, when Lila thought no one would come to her aid, a voice cut through the air like thunder. "Hey!" The single word exploded across the parking lot with such authority that every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The bikers froze, their cruel laughter dying in their throats as they turned toward the source of the interruption. Even the background noise of traffic seemed to fade as everyone present focused on the figure emerging from the cafe's entrance. John Cena stepped into the sunlight, and his presence immediately transformed the entire atmosphere of the parking lot. Standing 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighing nearly 300 pounds of solid muscle, he looked like he had been carved from granite. His broad shoulders strained against his simple black t-shirt, and his arms looked capable of moving mountains. But it was his eyes that commanded the most attention, piercing blue orbs that seemed to burn with an inner fire as he took in the scene before him. The wrestling superstar had been enjoying a quiet lunch during a rare break in his schedule when he noticed the commotion outside through the cafe's windows. At first, he had assumed it was just a minor disagreement between customers. But as he watched the 5 bikers surrounding the wheelchair-bound girl, his blood had begun to boil. The sight of grown men terrorizing a sick child ignited something primal within him, and he knew he couldn't sit by and watch. Tank was the first to recover from the initial shock of Cena's appearance. The biker leader had spent his entire adult life intimidating others, and he wasn't about to back down from anyone, celebrity or not. "Well, look what we got here, boys," he said with forced bravado. "Some muscle-bound pretty boy thinks he's gonna play hero." Cena's expression didn't change as he walked slowly toward the group, his movements deliberate and controlled. Each step he took seemed to make him appear larger, more imposing. "I think you gentlemen need to find somewhere else to be," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an unmistakable threat beneath the surface. Razor laughed nervously, trying to match his leader's false confidence. "Or what, tough guy? You gonna wrestle us to submission?" The joke fell flat as Cena continued his approach, and Razor unconsciously took a step backward. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Cena said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Leave. Now." He positioned himself between the bikers and Lila, his massive frame creating a protective barrier. For the first time since the ordeal began, Lila felt a glimmer of hope. Snake tried to circle around Cena to get closer to Lila again, but the wrestler smoothly shifted his position, blocking the attempt. "The little freak ain't your problem, muscle man," Snake snarled. "Why don't you mind your own business and let us finish our conversation?" The word freak hit Cena like a lightning bolt, and his carefully controlled demeanor cracked slightly. His hands clenched into fists, and the muscles in his jaw tightened visibly. "That's enough," he said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his anger. "You want to pick on someone? Try me." Tank stepped forward, trying to reassert his authority over the situation. "You think we're scared of some fake fighter? You probably couldn't hurt a fly without your fancy choreographed moves." He gestured to his companions, trying to draw courage from their numbers. "There's 5 of us and 1 of you, pretty boy. I like those odds." What happened next would be talked about in the town for years to come. Cena's transformation from concerned citizen to warrior was instantaneous and terrifying. His entire body language changed, shifting from protective to predatory in the span of a heartbeat. The casual observer might have missed it, but the bikers felt the change immediately. The air around them seemed to grow thicker, more dangerous. 5 against 1. Cena repeated, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're right. That does seem unfair." He paused, letting the words sink in. "For you." Bull, who had been standing slightly behind the others, began to edge away from the group. His survival instincts were telling him that they had made a serious mistake, but his pride kept him from running outright. "Come on, guys," he muttered. "Maybe we should just go. This ain't worth the trouble." But Tank was too far committed to back down now. His reputation among his crew was at stake, and showing weakness in front of them would undermine his leadership permanently. "Nobody tells the Devil's riders what to do," he growled, puffing out his chest. "Especially not some Hollywood fake." Viper and Razor moved to flank Cena, thinking they could overwhelm him with coordinated attacks from multiple angles. They had used this tactic successfully in bar fights before, but they had never faced anyone like John Cena. The wrestler's years of training had honed his awareness to a razor's edge, and he tracked their movements without even turning his head. Behind Cena, Lila watched in amazement as this stranger, this hero, prepared to face 5 dangerous men to protect her. She had never seen anyone stand up for her like this before. Throughout her illness, she had felt abandoned by the world, forgotten and invisible. But here was someone who saw her as worth defending, worth fighting for. The tension in the parking lot had reached a breaking point. Bystanders who had been watching from a distance began to back away further, sensing that violence was about to erupt. Some reached for their phones to call 911, while others continued recording, hoping to capture what promised to be an epic confrontation. Tank cracked his knuckles and rolled his shoulders, preparing for battle. "Your funeral, celebrity boy," he snarled. "Boys, let's teach this fake fighter what real pain feels like." As the bikers began to close in, Cena's smile widened slightly. He had spent his entire career facing opponents in choreographed matches, but this was different. This was real, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Behind him sat a vulnerable child who needed his protection, and in front of him stood 5 bullies who were about to learn why John Cena had become one of the most respected names in professional wrestling. The storm was about to break. The first attack came faster than most people could follow. Snake lunged forward with surprising speed, his fist aimed directly at Cena's jaw. But the wrestler was ready. Years of lightning-fast reflexes in the ring served him well as he smoothly ducked under the punch and drove his shoulder into Snake's midsection. The impact lifted the biker clean off his feet before Cena grabbed him around the waist and executed a perfect suplex, driving Snake's back into the concrete with devastating force. The sickening thud of Snake's body hitting the pavement echoed across the parking lot, immediately silencing any doubts about Cena's abilities. The biker lay motionless, his eyes rolled back, and his breathing labored. In the span of 3 seconds, the odds had shifted from 5 against 1 to 4 against 1. Bull and Razor attacked simultaneously from opposite sides, thinking they could overwhelm Cena with their coordinated assault. Bull threw a wild haymaker while Razor attempted to tackle Cena's legs. The wrestler's response was poetry in motion. He caught Bull's punch in midair, his massive hand completely engulfing the biker's fist. With a quick twist, he sent Bull spinning away with a dislocated shoulder. The man's scream of pain cutting through the AI, RDT the same time. Cena lifted his knee just as Razor's tackle connected, driving it directly into the biker's face. The impact was so severe that Razor bounced backward and crashed into a parked car, his nose clearly broken and blood streaming down his face. He slumped to the ground, semi-conscious and no longer a threat. Viper, seeing 3 of his companions neutralized in less than 10 seconds, began to panic. He reached into his jacket, his hand moving toward what looked like the handle of a knife. But Cena spotted the movement immediately. With a speed that seemed impossible for someone his size, the wrestler crossed the distance between them in 2 long strides. Cena's hand clamped down on Viper's wrist like a steel trap, preventing him from drawing whatever weapon he had been reaching for. "Bad idea," Cena growled, his voice carrying a menacing edge that made Viper's blood run cold. With a quick upward motion, Cena lifted the biker completely off the ground by his arm, holding him suspended in the air like a rag doll. "Please," Viper gasped, his face turning red as Cena's grip cut off circulation to his hand. I give up. Cena held him there for a moment longer, making sure the lesson was clear, before releasing his grip. Viper collapsed to the ground, clutching his wrist and backing away as fast as he could crawl. The fight had left him completely, replaced by a terror he had never experienced before. This left only Tank, the leader of the Devil's Riders, standing between Cena and complete victory. The massive biker looked around at his fallen comrades, his confidence evaporating as the reality of the situation hit him. He had built his reputation on intimidating those weaker than himself, but John Cena was anything but weak. You made a big mistake, Tank said, trying to inject some authority back into his voice. You have no idea who you're messing with. The Devil's Riders don't forget, and we don't forgive. Cena's expression remained cold and focused as he turned his full attention to the gang leader. You're right, he said quietly. I did make a mistake. I should have ended this the moment you opened your mouth. He began walking toward Tank with slow, measured steps, each one increasing the pressure on the increasingly desperate biker. Tank pulled out a chain he had wrapped around his belt, swinging it in wide arcs to keep Cena at a distance. Stay back, he shouted. I'll split your skull open. But his threats sounded hollow, even to his own ears. The chain, which had been an intimidating weapon against unarmed civilians, seemed pathetic against someone of Cena's caliber. With lightning-quick reflexes, Cena caught the chain on its next swing, wrapping it around his forearm and yanking hard. Tank stumbled forward, off balance and vulnerable. Cena's free hand shot out and grabbed the biker by the throat, lifting him several inches off the ground. Tank's feet dangled uselessly as he clawed at Cena's grip, his face turning purple from lack of oxygen. Listen carefully, Cena said, his voice deadly quiet. You're going to apologize to that young lady. Then you're going to get on your bikes and disappear. If I ever see you or any of your crew bothering innocent people again, what happened here today will seem like a warm-up. He tightened his grip slightly, making Tank's eyes bulge. Do we understand each other? Tank nodded frantically, unable to speak with Cena's hand around his throat. When the wrestler released him, he collapsed to his knees, gasping for air and massaging his neck. The fight had been completely beaten out of him, replaced by a survival instinct that told him to do whatever this monster demanded. Struggling to his feet, Tank turned toward Lila, who had watched the entire confrontation with wide-eyed amazement. The biker's earlier arrogance had been replaced by genuine fear and shame. I'm sorry, he stammered, his voice hoarse from Cena's choke hold. We shouldn't have bothered you. It won't happen again. Cena nodded approvingly, but kept his position between Tank and Lila. Now get your friends and get out of here, he commanded. And remember what I told you. Tank moved quickly to help his injured companions. Snake was slowly regaining consciousness, though he would clearly be feeling the effects of the suplex for weeks to come. Bull cradled his dislocated shoulder, tears of pain streaming down his face. Razor had managed to stop his nosebleed, but his face was already swelling badly. Viper was still nursing his crushed wrist, shooting fearful glances at Cena. Working together, the Devil's Riders helped each other toward their motorcycles. Their earlier swagger had been completely replaced by a desperate desire to escape before Cena changed his mind about letting them leave. Tank cast one last look back at the wrestler, memorizing his face with a mixture of fear and hatred that promised this encounter would not be forgotten. As the 5 bikers limped away from their motorcycles, several having difficulty even starting their engines due to their injuries, a cheer went up from the crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation. People who had been too afraid to intervene during the bullying were now applauding Cena's heroic actions, their phones capturing every moment of the aftermath. But Cena ignored the crowd entirely. His only concern was the young girl still sitting in her wheelchair, her eyes shining with gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite identify. As he knelt down beside her, he realized what it was. Hope. For the first time in what was probably months, this brave child had hoped that someone cared about her, that she mattered. The real battle, Cena understood, was just beginning. Cena knelt beside Lila's wheelchair, his earlier intensity melting away as he focused entirely on the young girl. Up close, he could see the full extent of what she had been enduring. Her skin had the pale, translucent quality that came from months of chemotherapy, and the knitted cap couldn't completely hide the patches where her hair had fallen out. But what struck him most were her eyes, dark, intelligent, and filled with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice a complete contrast to the commanding tone he had used with the bikers. "Did they hurt you?" Lila shook her head, though her hands were still trembling from the encounter. "No, they didn't touch me," she said quietly. "But they were going to." She didn't finish the sentence, but Cena could see the fear still lingering in her expression. "They're gone now," Cena assured her, his voice warm and comforting. "And they won't be bothering you or anyone else again." He glanced around the parking lot, where people were still recording with their phones and talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. "Is there somewhere we can talk that's a little more private?" Before Lila could answer, her parents came rushing out of the cafe, having finally learned what had happened from other customers inside. Her mother, Sarah, was a thin woman whose worried expression had become permanent over the past year of her daughter's illness. Her father, Marcus, was a hard-working man whose calloused hands showed the toll of taking on extra jobs to pay for Lila's medical expenses. "Lila," Sarah cried, rushing to her daughter's side and checking her over frantically. "Are you hurt? What happened? Someone inside said there were men bothering you." Marcus's attention was focused on Cena, recognition dawning on his face. "You're John Cena," he said in amazement. "You're the wrestler." He looked around at the evidence of the fight, the scattered belongings of the bikers, the dents in the car where Razor had been thrown, and began to piece together what had happened. "Your daughter is very brave," Cena told the parents, standing up to his full height. "She handled herself with more courage than most adults would have shown." He looked down at Lila with genuine admiration, but she shouldn't have had to handle it alone. Sarah was crying now, overwhelmed by the combination of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Cena's expression grew serious. "That's exactly the problem," he said. "There were dozens of people who saw what was happening, and not one of them stepped in to help." His voice carried a note of disappointment that made several nearby onlookers look away in shame. A child shouldn't have to rely on luck to find someone willing to protect her. Marcus extended his hand to Cena, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm Marcus Jackson, and this is my wife Sarah. Our daughter Lila has been fighting leukemia for the past 18 months. His voice broke slightly on the last words. "She's been through so much already, and to have those men target her like that." Cena shook Marcus's hand firmly, then knelt down to Lila's level again. "Leukemia is a tough opponent," he said, looking directly into her eyes. "But I can tell you're tougher. How are your treatments going?" Lila seemed surprised that this famous wrestler was genuinely interested in her medical condition. Most adults, even well-meaning ones, tended to speak to her parents about her rather than to her directly. "It's hard," she admitted. "Some days are better than others. The doctors say I'm responding well, but it doesn't feel like you're winning." Cena finished for her, understanding immediately. "I get that. Sometimes the hardest fights are the ones where you can't see your progress day by day." Sarah wiped her eyes and looked at Cena with curiosity. "You seem to know a lot about this. Do you work with sick children often?" Cena's expression softened. "I've spent a lot of time with kids fighting serious illnesses through Make-A-Wish and other organizations," he explained. "I've learned that they're often the strongest people I've ever met. They just need someone to remind them of that strength when they forget." He turned back to Lila, his tone becoming more intimate and encouraging. "Can I tell you something? What I saw here today wasn't a victim. Those men were expecting you to crumble, to give them the satisfaction of breaking you down. But you didn't. You sat here with dignity and strength, and you didn't let them win." Lila looked up at him with wonder. "But I was scared," she confessed. "I wanted to hide." "Being scared doesn't make you weak," Cena replied firmly. "Being scared and staying strong anyway, that's what makes you a champion." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I've been wrestling for over 20 years, and I've faced some tough opponents in that ring. But I've never faced anything as challenging as what you're going through right now." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances, both amazed by how naturally Cena connected with their daughter. They had watched Lila withdraw into herself over the months of treatment, becoming quieter and more isolated. But something about this conversation was bringing back the spark they remembered from before she got sick. "Would it be okay," Cena asked, addressing all three family members, "if I stayed in touch? I'd like to know how your treatment progresses, Lila. And maybe, if you're interested, you could come see one of my matches when you're feeling up to it." Lila's eyes widened with excitement, the first truly bright expression her parents had seen in months. "Really? You'd want me to come to a wrestling match. I'd be honored to have you there, Cena said sincerely. Champions support each other, and that's what you are, a champion. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, writing his personal phone number on the back. This goes to my private line. If you ever need anything, or if you just want to talk, you call me, day or night. Sarah took the card with shaking hands, unable to believe this was really happening. We can't thank you enough, she said. Not just for today, but for this, for caring about her. Cena stood up, but kept his attention focused on Lila. I want you to promise me something, he said. The next time you go in for treatment, I want you to remember how strong you were today. Those men tried to break you, and you didn't let them. Your cancer is just another bully, and you're going to beat it the same way. Lila nodded solemnly, clutching the business card as if it were a lifeline. I promise, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. As the family prepared to leave, Cena walked with them to their car, helping Marcus load Lila's wheelchair into the trunk. Before they drove away, Lila rolled down the window and called out to him. Mr. Cena, will you really answer if I call? He walked over to the window and looked her in the eyes with complete seriousness. Try me, he said with a smile. As they drove away, Cena stood in the parking lot watching until their car disappeared from view. Around him, the crowd was finally beginning to disperse, many people approaching to ask for autographs or selfies. But his mind was entirely focused on the brave young girl he had just met. He had stepped in to stop a bullying incident, but something told him this was the beginning of something much more important. 3 weeks had passed since the parking lot incident, and true to his word, John Cena had remained in constant contact with Lila and her family. Their relationship had evolved from a chance encounter into something deeper, a genuine friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. Cena had learned that Lila was not just battling leukemia. She was fighting for her very identity in a world that seemed determined to define her by her illness. Today was special. Lila was attending her first WWE Live event, and Cena had arranged for her and her parents to have VIP seating right at ringside. The arena buzzed with excitement as 20,000 fans filled the massive venue, but Cena's focus was entirely on the small section where Lila sat in her wheelchair, wearing a custom WWE shirt with Team Lila emblazoned across the front. The weeks of friendship had transformed both of them. Lila had begun to rediscover her voice and confidence, while Cena had found a new purpose beyond entertainment. He had started visiting the children's hospital, where Lila received treatment, spending time with other young patients and their families. Their bond had inspired him to establish the Never Give Up Foundation, dedicated to supporting children fighting serious illnesses. As Cena's entrance music hit and he stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted in deafening cheers. But before he made his way to the ring, he stopped and pointed directly at Lila. The camera operator, following Cena's direction, focused on the young girl, projecting her image onto the massive screens throughout the arena. Ladies and gentlemen, Cena's voice boomed through the sound system. I want you to meet someone very special. 3 weeks ago, I met the strongest person I've ever encountered. Her name is Lila Jackson, and she's been fighting a battle that would break most grown men. Tonight, she's here not as a patient, not as a victim, but as the champion she's always been. The entire arena erupted in applause, 20,000 people on their feet cheering for a 13-year-old girl who had never asked for fame, but had earned every bit of their respect. Lila's face appeared on the giant screens, her smile radiant as she waved to the crowd. For the first time in over a year, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Cena's match that night was different from any other in his career. Every move, every moment was dedicated to the young girl watching from ringside. When he faced adversity in the ring, he would glance at Lila, drawing strength from her presence, just as she drew strength from his. The connection was visible to everyone in attendance, creating an electric atmosphere that elevated the entire event. During the match, Cena found himself in trouble. His opponent, a massive heel wrestler named the Destroyer, had gained the upper hand and was systematically dismantling the champion. The crowd was on edge, sensing that their hero might actually lose. But then Cena looked over at Lila, who was leaning forward in her wheelchair, her hands pressed against the barrier. "Never give up," she shouted, her voice somehow carrying over the noise of the crowd. Those 3 words ignited something in Cena. He began his comeback, fighting with a passion and intensity that surprised even longtime fans. Every move was executed with precision and power, driven by the determination to show Lila that giving up was never an option. When he finally pinned the Destroyer for the victory, the celebration that followed was unlike anything the arena had ever seen. Instead of celebrating in the ring as usual, Cena immediately rolled out and walked directly to where Lila was sitting. He knelt beside her wheelchair, breathing heavily from the match but smiling broadly. "That was for you, champ," he said, loud enough for the nearby cameras to pick up. "You did it," Lila exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy and pride. "You never gave up." "Neither did you," Cena replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And you never will." After the show, Cena arranged for Lila and her parents to come backstage, where they met other wrestlers and WWE staff. But the most meaningful moment came when they were alone in Cena's dressing room. He had something important to tell them. "Lila," he began, his tone serious but warm, "I've been talking to your doctors, with your parents' permission, of course. I want to do something that goes beyond just being friends." He paused, making sure he had everyone's attention. "I want to cover all of your remaining medical expenses. Everything. Treatments, medications, hospital stays, whatever it takes to get you healthy." The room fell silent. Sarah began crying immediately, while Marcus struggled to find words. Lila looked confused, not fully understanding the financial burden her illness had placed on her family. "But why?" she asked innocently. "You barely know me." Cena knelt down to her level, his voice gentle but firm. "Because you've taught me something incredibly important. Strength isn't about how much weight you can lift or how many matches you can win. Real strength is getting up every day and fighting, even when you don't know if you're going to win. You've been doing that for over a year, and you've inspired me to be better." He reached into his bag and pulled out a small box. Inside was a custom-made necklace with a pendant that read "Champion" in elegant script. "This is for you," he said, fastening it around her neck, "so you never forget what you are." Over the following months, Cena's support went far beyond financial assistance. He became a regular presence in Lila's life, visiting her during treatments, celebrating good days, and providing comfort during the difficult ones. He brought other WWE superstars to meet her, turning her hospital room into a constant stream of visitors who all came to pay their respects to the young champion. More importantly, he helped Lila find her voice as an advocate. Together, they started making appearances at other hospitals, sharing their story and inspiring other children fighting similar battles. Lila discovered that she had a gift for speaking to other young patients, helping them find strength in their own struggles. As Lila's treatment progressed and her health improved, their friendship evolved into something even more meaningful. She began accompanying Cena to WWE events regularly, not just as a guest, but as an honorary member of the team. The wrestling community embraced her completely, and she became known as the Ultimate Champion among fans and wrestlers alike. The transformation was remarkable. The scared, isolated girl who had been terrorized in that parking lot had become a confident young woman who used her experience to help others. Her hair had grown back thicker and darker than before. Her strength had returned, and her smile could light up any room she entered. 1 year after their first meeting, Lila stood in the center of a WWE ring, holding a microphone as thousands of fans hung on her every word. She was there to announce that she had been declared cancer-free, but more importantly, she was there to thank the man who had changed her life. "A year ago, I thought I was alone," she said, her voice steady and strong. "I thought nobody cared about me, that I didn't matter. Then John Cena showed me that I was wrong. He didn't just save me from those bullies. He saved me from giving up on myself." She turned to Cena, who was standing nearby with tears in his eyes. "You taught me that being strong isn't about never being scared. It's about being scared and fighting anyway. You taught me that I'm not just a patient or a victim. I'm a champion." The crowd was on their feet, many wiping away tears as they witnessed the conclusion of an incredible journey. But for Cena and Lila, this wasn't an ending. It was a new beginning. Their friendship had created something beautiful and lasting, proving that sometimes the most important victories happen outside the ring. As they embraced in the center of the ring, surrounded by the cheers of thousands, both knew that they had changed each other's lives forever. A chance encounter in a parking lot had become a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, and more importantly, to the incredible strength that can be found in the most unlikely friendships. The girl who had once sat alone and afraid in a wheelchair was now standing tall, ready to face whatever challenges life might bring. And beside her stood the champion who had learned that his greatest victory would never be captured by any title belt. It was measured in the smile of a young girl who had learned to never give up,